And I'm going to mute my.
Good Wednesday evening, everybody, and welcome to Direct Line Live. My name is Jackie Saxtein, and tonight we have a very special Maryland Republican Jewish Council takeover for you. And we're going to be switching up the format a little bit. So along with me today, I have the rest of my Republican Jewish Council board. I'm wearing a different hat tonight. And we have our president, Josh Safran. We have our secretary, Nicole Bennett, who is nobody's secretary, but more just along for the ride, and our treasurer, Andrew Koch, and I'm our vice president as well and founding member. Of course, you guys know me already. So tonight we're going to have just a conversation about why Jewish people should vote Republican, because I don't know about you guys, but it is beyond me why the vast majority of Jewish people tend to continuously vote Democrat when it doesn't seem to be in their best interest. So we're going to try and dig in and figure out why that is and see if we can convince some people to maybe change their minds. So how are you guys doing?
Great.
I'm always awesome.
I'm ready. I'm ready for Sukkot because Sukkot is now this week. So I was working on that earlier.
Yeah, so what is Sukkot?
It is the festival of booths, and it commemorates when during the 40 years of the children of Israel wandering through the desert before entering Israel, they would build shelters for themselves, these booths wandering through the Sinai desert. And also Sukkot is an agricultural holiday, and farmers, when they would be out working the fields, bringing in the harvest at the end of the growing season in biblical Israel, they would also build shelters for themselves, temporary shelters, these booths known as sukkahs, and that's what they would stay in while working to bring in the harvest, because Sukkot marks the start of the rainy season in Israel.
Or in layman's terms, we eat dinner in tents.
Okay, because I was going to ask Jackie, how does this relate to treats and food?
It's also that time of year when you see Jews walking around with those giant lemon-looking fruits, and a giant kind of green, like almost like a vine or bamboo, not really. Yeah, that's that time of year.
Sukkot for me just means going to Hebrew school and making daisy chains out of like little paper circles.
Okay, so Josh, tell me, why be a Republican? As a young Jewish man, what attracted you to the Republican Party?
So I would say I was Republican-ish longer before I was more prominent in my Jewish identity, if that kind of makes sense. Where being a Republican, it didn't mean having to do certain things. It just meant the government couldn't tell me to do certain things. I always have to make the distinction when I'm explaining to people my political identity. When I say I'm a conservative, a lot of people automatically think Christian conservative. I'm like, no. I'm a small government conservative. I want limited government because, as a Jew, you have to look at it where throughout history, we cannot trust big government to look after us. So why give governments more power? Also, today, if we look at it, you have one side that, there are some issues with, the Republican side, the right side, but the other side is actively anti-Semitic. Like, come on, is there really a choice?
Yeah, like we only have one Marjorie Taylor Greene. They have a lot of squad members over there.
We have Paul Gosar also. Then there is a lot on the more local levels, but on the federal level, it's really just MTG and Gosar.
Very interesting. So Andrew, Josh mentioned anti-Semitism, and I know that our council is working on something special regarding anti-Semitism. Can you give us a heads up about what's coming next with that?
What's coming next is actually in 2021, the Republican National Committee adopted a resolution that condemns anti-Semitism, and we are working to introduce that to the Maryland Republican Party. And basically it's essentially the same resolution as what's been adopted by the RNC.
Fantastic. So we're looking for a little common ground, a common definition. I think things are easier to avoid when you have a very good idea of what you're looking for. And I think it would help greatly with that. Josh, you wanted to add in?
Of course. Yeah, we're looking to adapt the IHRA, or the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which is the most widely internationally recognized definition of anti-Semitism. So to adapt that, it's going to strengthen what anti-Semitism is, so that way we actually know what we're fighting against. And so other people, non-Jews, can actually help identify anti-Semitism when it's occurring, and they can better call it out.
And I feel
In
like
particular,
yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
and in particular, to enlist the aid of law enforcement. So law enforcement will be able to identify what are anti-Semitic acts that will qualify as hate crimes.
So as we've seen, especially with what's going on in Montgomery County, as they were trying to pass that definition at the county council level, one of the biggest misnomers about it that they push back on, and Josh is already like gearing himself up here. One of the largest misnomers is that they're saying that, well, this means you're telling us we're not allowed to criticize the state of Israel. Would you like to dispel that myth?
Okay. So, that is a common talking point by CARE and other cohorts of CARE. But the reality is anybody can criticize Israel, but criticize policy. Be specific in your criticism. But if you make a blanket statement with no substance, and you're holding Israel to a different standard than any other nation, you might just be an anti-Semite. You might just be a Jew hater. It's that simple. If you have a problem with the only Jewish state, but you don't hold that standard to any other nation, I'm sorry. The problem is you, not Israel. Do better.
Well, tell us how you really feel, Josh. So just listen, I think it's important that people understand that hate comes in all forms. And how this ties us back, to circle back, how this ties us to certain minority groups, quote unquote, minority groups, becoming more and more conservative, more and more traditional in their views, is that when you're forced to kind of go back into yourself, back into your own communities to protect yourself from everyone else, it does kind of drive up a little bit of a fear factor of large government entities, so to speak. And that's something the African American community absolutely shares with the Jewish community. Neither one of our communities have had very good success with large government entities. Just being very honest here. However, as we look at today in 2022, what do you think would be a marketing factor to bring more Jewish people to the Republican Party? What do you think would attract them the most?
I mean, the thing that first jumps to my mind, if we're going immediate thoughts, is support of the state of Israel. We continue, and that there's a lot of people on the Republican side who are like, we keep sending money to other countries. What about taking care of ours? But Israel has always been a staunch ally of the United States, and vice versa. And we are the party who, and Donald Trump in particular is particularly fond of the state of Israel. We were very steadfast in our support, sending money over to help with the Iron Dome, whereas I believe one of Obama's final pieces of action before he left the White House was to give millions of dollars to the Palestinians, just as like an FU to the Jewish people on the way out the door.
Yeah, the airdrop. Yeah, the airdrop heard around the world, right?
That was the airdrop.
So I actually disagree with Jackie. I disagree with Jackie. So the problem, we can't use Israel as a marketing tool for the left. There are so many leftist Jews who are not connected with Israel. They would consider themselves anti-Zionist, but they also still call themselves proud Jews. I think the reality is we need to show them the anti-Semitism that is on the left, because they think they're in some kind of safe space on the left. The reality is there is no true safe space. Yes, we're fighting to make the Republican side of the right safer for Jews. Israel is ultimately the salvation or the sanctuary for the Jewish people. That's why Israel must survive. But the Jews on the leftist Jews, the anti-Zionist Jews, they become far too comfortable within groups that could just as well look the other way and watch as they're being attacked. There are pick-me's in a society who doesn't give a crap about their existence. So we need to expose what's actually going on around them. whether it's Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, whether it's the Nation of Islam types or the Black Hebrew Israelite types, any of that.
Even the Black Lives Matter types. I mean, if you go
Of
and
course.
read their platform, and again, it's Black Lives Matter, the organization, not the concept.
Yeah, I've done several videos on Black Lives Matter, and I'll continue to expose Black Lives Matter and how the organization as a whole is very anti-Israel. And I apologize for interrupting you, Jackie. My bad.
Oh, no, you're good. Josh should definitely plug his TikTok at the end of this.
For sure. So Josh, and I'm going to continually point this out as a non-Jewish member of this board, when you say certain words that we often hear in the media that we've not yet defined, like Zionist, can you give us a really good definition of what a Zionist is to kind of make it easier for a layperson to understand?
Of course, the definition actually is really easy. You don't need a PhD to understand Zionism. Zionism is the belief that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state, period.
Fantastic. I disagree with you. CNN uses a different definition, but okay. Have at it, Josh.
As I would say in Hebrew, CNN ala Zayin sheli.
And in English, please.
Not appropriate.
Look it up.
Oh, Josh. My goodness. So listen, as we talked about before, there are certain characteristics that mark traditional life, conservative life for a Jewish person, and conservative life for a Republican person. Where is that common ground? What do we share? What common ground kind of binds the two parties together?
Just giving us
I'd say freedom of religion, the very first freedom that is protected in the First Amendment. And it says in the Constitution, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom to practice religion or to establish an official state religion. And that's paraphrasing. That's not exactly what the First Amendment says, but my point still stands. What we have on the Democrat Party, in the Democrat Party today, is they are actively working to remove the Lord from our lives. We see the demonization of Orthodox Jews. We see the demonization of Christians, and especially Catholics, for their religious beliefs. And that flies in the face of freedom of religion. So I would use that as a marketing tool to reach out to Jews to say, look, we have a party, a political ideology that actively is working to deny freedom of religion, to remove religion from our lives. And religion is what this country was founded upon. That was what brought the Pilgrims to Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. Was religion.
I would say also this is less about the religious side of Judaism and just more of Judaism as a community and as a culture, is our ability to pick ourselves up and to be hard workers and to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, which I know is also very much a Republican value. Nicole, you've talked a lot about the book that Please Don't Help Us.
Please stop helping us.
Stop helping us. Yeah. And which speaks specifically to the African American community, but for us as well, just like we never, after the Holocaust, we never asked for reparations. We never asked for help. We came and we lived our lives and we rebuilt our communities. And, a lot of the really anti-Semitic language out there is that like, Jews control the media, Jews control the banks, Jews control everything. Like, no, we just work hard. And you know what? And not all of us are rich and living in towers and everything. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of Jews living in poverty, just like there's a lot of people in general living in poverty. But the Jewish community I found and quite frankly, the Republican community as well, as I've gotten to know everybody here, is just some of the most philanthropic and kind-hearted people that I know on both sides that will give you the shirt off their back or the food out of your fridge if it meant that you were comfortable and able to feed yourself and your family for another night.
That's a good point, Jackie. When you talk about the stereotypes, those are some of the same stereotypes that people hold about Republicans. It's a very interesting prospect when you think about how monolithic the left and the media have painted us. We are all rich old white men. Although you're sitting here talking to a Black woman, everybody's a racist. Like there's a handbook that comes and says, okay, step number 1, be old, white, and rich. It is very interesting that those same parallels have been used fairly unsuccessfully with a lot of different cultures. They say that about a lot of different cultures that I think they're fearful of.
So I'd actually like to expand on that, and I agree with both of you, where the Republican Party and the Jewish community have both been whitewashed by the left, by society, by culture, by Hollywood, by whoever you want to call it. But, you know, if we want to apply CRT into it, where, you know, they automatically say, oh, you can't be racist towards white people and Jews are white, so anti-Semitism doesn't really exist. Or, oh, you know, if you're black and you can't decide if you're voting for Biden or Trump, then you ain't black. You know, Biden said that. The reality is they love to racialize everything, and they love to whitewash everything and tokenize and use different people. And the minute you're no longer useful, they just dismiss you as being white. And
useful idiots.
Exactly. But it's obvious talking points which we can all agree on. But the reality is they keep on using these talking points, and they are effective to a certain degree. You know, not to the politically minded, but to the less so. The people who see it ingrained in their TV shows are watching every week. You know, the prime time sitcoms, whatever, were so ingrained in that culture. It's scary.
It's worse than scary. It really is kind of degrading of everyone in our nation, not just the communities that they're attacking. But if we allow them to attack the Jews, Black people, brown people, well, who's going to be left?
Right.
You know, they'll come for everyone eventually, right?
Yeah,
Until there's no one left.
Well, and I have a question for you guys that I want to put to you, and because I know that we talk about this a lot in our group chat, and there's multiple instances of this. What is one of the times that you've stood out and you've seen something in the news that's just like, once again, that made you put your head in your hands? You're like, why do Jewish people continue to vote Democrat? Like for me, it was when there were, and there still are, unfortunately, the attacks going on against Orthodox Jews, particularly in New York City. And I don't remember who it was from the Biden administration said, well, you can just take off your yarmulke and your tzitzit if you're feeling unsafe walking down the street. You can hide your Jewishness.
For me, it was right after Biden went into office, and you know, in contravention to the Taylor Force Act, he signed over nearly $500 million to the Palestinian Authority, and then within months after that, rockets started raining down on Tel Aviv, on Netanya, which is about as far north as they've ever gone, further north than ever before. And yeah, like the Taylor Force Act, for I'm guessing for everybody watching, because nobody ever knows what it is basically under the Trump administration, 2018. Trump signed a bill defunding the Palestinian Authority until they stop their pay for slave program, which incentivizes terrorism, meaning for every innocent person that's killed, maimed, attacked, that person or their family gets paid large sums of money. And it was named after it was named after a U.S. Army veteran who was out of the Army, but he was on a school trip with Vanderbilt University in Tel Aviv, and he got stabbed on the streets and died. And ironically enough, or coincidentally, or whatever the heck the word is, Joe Biden was actually in Israel at the time this happened. And yet a couple years later, when Biden's actually in office, he signs over hundreds of millions of dollars for more innocent people to be killed and for more terror, including the person who killed Taylor Force. Luckily, he was ended, but his family is receiving large sums of money every year from the Palestinian Authority, which is also from the United States government.
So incentivizing terror is
yes,
yeah.
Pay for slay, incentivizing terror.
And to expand on that point, just this past summer, the Palestinian Authority received another $400 million of our taxpayer money. They received that money, and you know what happened? A couple of rounds of rocket fire, smaller round of rocket fire in mid-July, and then at the beginning of August, a larger barrage of rocket fire by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, 1,100 rockets in 3 days, almost all of which were intercepted by Iron Dome or just landed in unpopulated areas. And 14 Palestinians were killed by errant rockets that failed to get out of Gaza. So that is because Palestinian Islamic Jihad is using 1990s weaponry against 2022 defense technology in Israel. And that is why there were no deaths or injuries among Israelis. I think it was only one Palestinian who was injured when a rocket hit an empty factory in Ashkelon. This was back again in early August, and that was Operation Breaking Dawn.
So this is a very interesting thing. You know, as a Christian person and a member of this group, but mostly just as a regular person, I've read these articles. I've come across news stories. You know, as you well know, I don't watch much television as I'm busy doing actual life. But if I know that as a Christian person, and I find it appalling, I find that people who incentivize terror, just absolute dregs of society. You know what I mean? How is it that Jews continue to cast votes for Democrats, full well knowing that they're supporting and incentivizing this kind of terror against their own people?
Well, and I know that this is probably going to be opening up a door into a much deeper conversation that I don't know if we have time to get into on this. But when I see a lot of my parents' friends, people who were from my synagogue growing up, posting, you know, who are all Democrats, they thought immediately the first thing Trump was going to do when he took office was get rid of gay marriage, which, like, Trump could not care less. He loves the log cabin Republican.
Yes, he does. Mm-hmm.
He had the first openly gay member of his cabinet in Rick Grinnell. So they couldn't be more upbeat. So I think part of that was a misunderstanding of Republicans and our big tent acceptance of the LGBTQ community. And another part of it, unfortunately, this year is more of a distinct part of a lot of people's minds has to do with abortion. And I know that I've actually candidly asked you guys about this, about where we as Jews stand on abortion. I remember doing a lot of research on it in Roe v. Wade, and it does seem to be very much split among the Orthodox Jewish community and the conservative Reformed community. Mm-hmm. So that's at least what I've noticed through social media posts, why it seems some people tend to go that way.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. But the other part, it ultimately comes down to, with politics, you have a lot of single issue voters, and it ultimately comes down to how you prioritize things. And ultimately, you know, call me selfish, but I prioritize my self-preservation. And, you know, when you have one side that is anti-Semitic and is actually fueling things such as, you know, pay for slay and the ultimate destruction of the Jewish people, or, you know, an Iran deal, which would empower Iran with nuclear weapons, and Iran wants to promote a second Holocaust and kill all the Jews. I'm sorry, you know, my priorities are self-preservation and then other things. Other Jews, their priorities are, I care more about, I guess, immigration, open borders, which is a very racist idea anyway. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're stupid, uninformed, or what, but their priorities are out of whack, and they definitely don't prioritize their Jewish identity.
I think it's uninformed, because I don't think stupid brings them over to our side.
I think it's probably more of a disconnect. You know, what I have personally found in talking to members of both of our communities, and the reasoning for them being Democrats, some of them have never really known any Republicans. So they have that stereotypical, you know, older, white, very rich stereotype in their head. And when they actually talk to someone who is a Republican, say, okay, well, here are the reasons why I'm a Republican, because I believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I do believe in American exceptionalism. I want my child to be able to go to a public school and get an outstanding education. But if she cannot, I want my tax dollars to follow her to a charter school or private school or a homeschooling situation. And I don't want to turn over 33 1/3% of my income for people who choose not to work. Yes, yeah. I'll take care of the sick and the infirmed, the old, absolutely. That's absolutely the right thing to do. But, you know, 26 years old and you're a PlayStation king, you know, that's an issue. That's a whole issue. But those are my personal reasonings. And in speaking to them, they say, oh, I believe all of that. But that's not what Republicans stand for. Mm-hmm. So what I've heard from people in our particular communities are a disconnect between what they believe that we believe, what we've shown them that we believe, because again, as you guys know, rank and file Republicans are very different than the Republicans that you see on TV, right? And I say that as a Republican who's been on TV. But it takes a lot for people to kind of understand the spectrum of republicanism. And I think the same thing for our communities. There's a spectrum of Jews and a spectrum of African American people. And somewhere in that spectrum, we've gotten lost in the shuffle. How do we right that ship?
Yeah, but it's weird where they can justify the extremism on the left, which is becoming more mainstream, but they isolate the extremism on the right, which is more fringe and definitely not part of the
Gonna
mainstream
say
party.
that.
Which, yes, there certainly is that disconnect, which is very difficult to overcome, where, if you're on dating apps, which I'm sure some of us are, and you're scrolling, you see people who put no MAGA in their profiles or no Trumpsters or anything like that.
All cops are bastards.
Yeah, ACAB,
Wow.
all of that. And, personally, me, I wouldn't mind dating somebody of the opposite political side if they have solid reasoning and we can have worthy discussions. It's okay to disagree. But so many people, they feel more comfortable in their echo chamber because we've demonized our opposition. And by demonizing them, by saying, it's not that you're wrong, you are evil. And when you say that they're evil, you can just throw out their existence. You can invalidate them. You don't need to listen to them or legitimize them because they're evil.
We're back to that degradation again. Yeah, that degradation.
Dialogue.
And that is a result, I think that's a result of, I think it's because it doesn't take a lot of mental capacity to arrive at. It doesn't take a lot of mental capacity to not have any nuance. And to go back to the points earlier about critical race theory and brushing people with broad strokes, Josh, to what you were talking about earlier, that's because I think these liberals do not have the mental capacity to comprehend that.
I wouldn't say that. I think the reality is, if we look back 20 years ago, whether it's the early 2000s, late 90s, there were a lot of things both parties agreed on. Whether, support of Israel, that was a bipartisan issue. Looking at abortion, safe, legal, and rare. Both sides kind of agreed on that and, just kind of looked the other way. It was okay. Foreign policy, the parties were much closer connected. But I would say in the past 15 years or so, they've been driven apart, partly by the media, partly by bombastic politicians on both the right and the left. A lot of identity politics, a lot of polarization, and it's just not great.
Do you know what I think is? You made a very good point there, Josh. Is that we used to all be very good Americans, and that was the most important thing. Being a good American superseded what your political beliefs were. And unfortunately, one of the surefire ways to bring Americans back to that, I love America, patriotic, let's put our nation right, unfortunately, is some sort of horrific attack on our nation or some devastating, weather event that kind of brings everyone back to the table. Yeah. I don't ever want to have to live through another attack on the United States. I don't ever want to live through that. It is a horrible, horrible sensation, especially for children, to have that kind of safety that's kind of built into our culture yanked away from them. A lot of those 9/11 kids who were small during that time, have anxiety issues. Our nation was attacked. What's going on? I don't understand. I don't want that to happen again. But, 9/11 was a horrible day. 9/12 was a whole horse of a different color. There were more American flags. People were, as a community, what can we do? It's unfortunate that that's the only time that happens. Back in the day, politics was definitely more gentlemanly, to kind of coin a phrase. Everyone wanted what was best for the nation. We had different ways of getting there, but advancing the nation in a safe and solid kind of most important. We're not seeing that.
But even things like natural disasters and major world events that should be bringing us together aren't anymore. I mean, even Hurricane Ian that recently has been politicized, right? We're seeing, unfortunately, Vice President Harris with, I don't know if that's a Freudian slip or she really meant it, saying that aid would be distributed equitably based off of race and not based.
That was intentional.
That was intentional. It was written
for
her.
Or something like COVID that I thought would
exactly.
What can bring something together like a world pandemic that we're all going through? Probably one of the most politicized things, in this generation.
Well, Jackie, my stance on that is government has no business in healthcare. Everything they touch in healthcare is destroyed. You need an example? It's called Medicare.
The
horrible,
reality
horrible
is we don't. There used to be a time, and it was partly because it was pre-internet era. 2000s. Yeah, the internet was still alive, but it wasn't as big a thing. But now, 20 years later, it's much more of a behemoth, and we don't trust the government. There's no longer a 24-hour news cycle. We have a 10-minute news cycle where we're getting instant, late-breaking access to every headline every second of every day. And there is no trust. If we look at all the scandals with the FBI, with anything, I don't know if we're ever going to be united as Americans again. Nationalism is a taboo word, where
patriotism is too.
People automatically associate nationalists with white nationalists, and that's not the case. Nationalism is just the opposite of globalism. But people also say globalist is a dog whistle for anti-Semites saying Jews. So it's all insanity.
I think it's a very interesting thing that you brought up, and it smacks of some political things that I'm sure the four of us know all about. But when the left changes language, when they take a common word and ascribe to it a different definition, and then the next thing you see is TikTok dances dedicated to this word that now has a new definition, and then when that doesn't quite work out, they move the ball a little bit more, right? Let's simply talk about recession. So we all know what a recession is. Harvard, Yale, all of these, highbrow economists know what the definition of recession is. But you get the press secretary comes out and says, no, we're not calling that a recession anymore. Now we're going to wait until we have 3 quarters, underwater, and then we may consider it a recession. We're heading
That's
toward
just
a recession.
Insulting everyone's intelligence.
Well, what it does is it reframes language, and I think that's one of the things that the left does successfully in minority communities, especially.
They're great at messaging.
Their messaging to Black, Brown, Jewish communities, Asian communities has always been, here's the goal line, now move to the goal line, and the goal line moves. It's kind of like that Peanuts cartoon where she keeps moving the ball and Charlie Brown keeps coming trying to kick it, and she keeps yanking it away from him. It's very much it's very much that same way. So there are some communities that are saying, hey, if you're going to keep yanking the ball, then I'm not going to kick the ball, I'll just kick you. And then this is where we start seeing violence and dissidents, and I don't like the police, I don't like these institutions. It becomes something much bigger. And I'm wondering, as a Jewish group, what is our messaging going to look like to kind of interfere with what they're doing in our communities with words? It's a very interesting proposition.
We have to, I'll go quick and then you can go, Josh. It's just, we have to lead by action. We talked about earlier how we're working to get that IHRA definition passed at our state party level. Mm-hmm. We're also going to try and get it passed at the state level, in our state legislature. And we're going to work to make sure that Holocaust education is mandated in our schools. My sister-in-law, her mother is a teacher in inner city Philadelphia, and she has been pushing to bring back Holocaust education in the schools. And she went up to the principal of the school. She said, why are we not teaching this? And his answer was, because it's no longer relevant. And wow. I think it could not be more untrue at this moment, as we're seeing more and more anti-Semitism in this country.
Tell that to the staff at Yad Vashem.
Right, exactly.
A big part of it is meeting these people where they are. We can't wait for them to come to us. Whether it's engaging with the crazy people on TikTok or Twitter or whatever other apps there are, that is what the younger generations are using. And the younger generations, they're the future voters. Mm-hmm. And hey, if I influence 5 people, 10 people, 100, 1,000, that's making a difference. That's chipping away. And, I always say we may never win the war in fighting against anti-Semitism and fighting against this, fighting against that. But the minute we stop fighting, we lose. The quote attributed to Edmund Burke, which, whoever it really belongs to, who the heck knows, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
It's interesting because I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, and our school, Pittsburgh is very much a multicultural city, very much so. In an elementary school, there was no choice. There was no opting out of, any of the activities. that we had. So quite literally it would be Christmas time and we're singing Hanukkah songs, the dreidel song, we're singing Polish songs. I mean, you sang whatever the music teacher told you to sing, and you appreciated it, but you did kind of touch a little bit of everyone. You touched a little bit of everyone so that everyone felt like they had skin in the game, a seat at the table, and it made everyone feel at least heard, at least recognized. And I think that's a big part of what's missing as we attempt to kind of advance republicanism in our respective communities, is that we have to, one, be willing to listen to the anger, the betrayal, what they believe we've done, what the party has quote unquote done to them and done to their culture, and listen intently, not with the thought process of as soon as they say this word, I'm going to, spring on them pounce on them like a tiger, but really listen. And what I've personally found is you hear a lot of talking points that they've heard from other people. And when you drill down on it, say, well, what makes you think that? What makes you think that Jews hate Blacks? What would make you think
for
that?
substance and there's nothing there, and it's.
Well, they say, well, the Jews control everything. I said, really? Because I know a lot of poor Jewish people. I'm just going to be honest with you. Yep. They go to work every day. Some of my closest friends, they go to work every day. And we get on our Zoom for our meeting and we talk about, how Josh is lifting weights and enjoying a very light carb but very high protein meal. He doesn't have a maid or a butler that's, peeling him a grape. He works like everybody else. I think demystifying who we really are helps, and a lot of people don't know that they know people who are Jewish, because there is no scarlet A on the front of your forehead.
A lot of anti-Semitism, it's not active. It's stuff that people are taught in their schools, in their churches, in their, by their families, and they don't even realize it's anti-Semitism. I know I've told you guys before, but for the benefit of others, I've had friends from different parts of the country, one in Connecticut and one in Alaska. They both told me that they thought Zionism meant worshiping Lucifer. And when I heard that, I'm like, what the heck? And then, 6 months later, my other friend says it. And I'm like, where are they getting this? One of them told me he learned it in church. And I'm like, and this guy, he's not a Satanist or anything. He's a Christian. So I'm thinking, what the heck? And I'm not demonizing Christians, but some people are learning things that are incorrect. And they're like I said, they're friends. They're not hateful people. They're not thinking like Jews are evil because they do that. They're just thinking, oh, that's what Zionism is. Or, oh, this is what Jews do. So trying to dispel these misconceptions. And they don't even realize they have misconceptions because they just take it at face value.
Yeah. You look at all the kids who are followers or enjoy Kanye's music and his clothing. It only takes one very popular person to say something before it travels around the world. Back in the early 90s, it took a while for trash to make it around the globe. Now it's seconds. And even if you jump in front of it, it blows past you so very quickly that you don't have anything to stop and say, hey, not only is this not right, but check your source, check your source.
And the reality is nobody ever sees the retraction. If we all remember a couple years ago with Nick Cannon, when he went off about unmelanated people have no souls and Black people are the real Jewish people and all that other crap, a mix between Farrakhan and Nation of Islam, or Black Hebrew Israelite stuff. And then 2 weeks later, he sat down with a rabbi and he went to a Holocaust memorial in LA and he apologized. And when he apologized, he got a lot of hate from the Black community, but then most of the people didn't even see the apology. But then he got uncanceled 6 months later. And now he's back to having babies every 3 months or whatever, because that's Nick Cannon. But it's the stuff, whether it's Kanye is like the latest and biggest one, of course, but it'll be another athlete, musician, somebody within another 2 months. It happens all the time.
What I think is, I'm sorry to cut you off, Josh, but I really think sometimes the worst damage is done not by people with lots of celebrity, but people in your life that you trust. Your pastor, another Jewish person, right? Because I've heard some fairly hateful things come out of some Jewish people's mouths, and I know that they're trying to be, edgy, that kind of thing. But it is so hateful that even as a Christian person, I'm looking at them going, what did you say?
Yeah,
It
I have
is
a lot of Christian friends who are like, oh, haha, well, you guys killed Jesus, so.
Yeah, the Jewish population is very, very small in the world, you know, and smaller than people realize. And not every Jew represents Judaism well.
Mhm.
And there's kind of this idea, should every Jew have to represent all of Judaism?
No.
No. But do they? Yeah, because the reality is most non-Jews, they might only meet one or two Jews in their whole entire life because of the ratio of Jews to non-Jews in the world. Yeah, it's a sucky reality.
Well, that brings us to a very ugly point. So there are people who believe, and don't shoot the messenger. Y'all know my heart.
I got a good aim, so be careful.
Look, Nicole Bennett's hard to kill, just so you know. But there is a particular subset of people, and some, of course, in the right wing of the far right wing of our party, who believe that Jews are asking for special privileges, that in some way, shape, or form, that you've assigned to yourself this protected status that no one else gets to enjoy. Now, as someone who's spent a majority of my life around Jewish people, I know that not to be true. But what do you say to those people? What do you say to those people? Say, oh, well, you're already a super protected class. Why do you want this definition? Why do you want extra protection? The world is already protecting you. What do you say to that?
Pittsburgh, Poway,
Colliesville.
What?
Colliesville.
Yep.
Just about every college campus in the United States.
University of Maryland.
I'm going to say something that a lot of people don't like when we're talking about Israel, the reality. So Israel in 1948 was attacked by 8 other countries, and Israel won. But to this day, other people are still disputing Israel's victory in 1948. People are still disputing Israel's right to exist after 74 years of actually existing. Imagine after America won the Revolutionary War, and then all of a sudden, when America's fighting the Civil War, the British people are still saying, oh, this is our land, get out of here. We want all of this. You're occupying British land. That's what it is. The reality is people think Zionism is some kind of colonialist idea. No. If you believe in a 2-state solution and one of those states is Israel, then you're a Zionist. When somebody says free Palestine or from the river to the sea, they don't want Israel to exist at all. They want, when you actually ask them what they want to happen, they say they want all the Jews to go back to Europe. So yeah, when people start to say that kind of crap, they want the complete eradication of the state of Israel. That is why we need the protection. Well, I'm not asking for any special privileges. Jews, ultimately, we just want to be left alone to live in peace.
Yeah.
Part of the xenophobia towards Jews is the isolationism, and the isolationism is the distrust for others based on society and the years of history.
Yeah, I mean, we joke about it all the time, and I made it no secret that I am far from the most Jewish person in this group of Jewish people. I love my bacon. I love my shellfish, I love using my technology on the weekends. And
Jews come in all flavors.
It was actually a really big and hard decision for me to let Andrew come over and put up a mezuzah on my door, because my initial thought was, I don't want to make myself a target. And that's sad to live in 2022 in America and be afraid to have any, permanent outward symbol of my Judaism, which is a part of my culture that I'm very, very proud of, but because I'm afraid that somebody might try to throw a rock through my window.
What's really sad is that I got a email message from a Republican that lives in Prince George's County and said that although he was going to support my current project for signage, he did not want one in front of his home for the very same reasons, because he felt like he would be outed, that he would be harassed. It is so bizarre that we keep traveling in these two separate circles, but the part where we intersect, there are so many things, especially here in Maryland. Being outnumbered is a big thing. But I want to say, as a friend to Jewish people, and the Jewish community on a greater scale, when there is an attack, like the attack at the Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, I've been to that synagogue more times than I can remember. It was an attack against all Americans, not just Jewish Americans. We simply cannot have these kind of hate attacks on any segment of our population. It is just absolutely inconceivable that there are parts of this nation that would say, oh, well, it's just the Jews.
Yeah, but those things need to be called out as anti-Semitism and as hate. After Colliesville, immediately 12 hours later, the FBI said, oh, we're not investigating as a hate crime.
Yeah.
But after, upstate New York, when a grocery store got shot up, they're like, oh, this is a hate crime. And me as a Jew, I'm thinking, why don't they care about us?
Right. How is
I
that
think
different?
we're leaving this on a thinker for people to really contemplate where the anti-Semitism is coming from, why we feel like, not that we need extra special protection, just that we need protection the same way that anybody else in this country does, that we deserve it. So I think
give a crap about us.
Yeah, and we'll go around. I think we'll just give everyone a chance at final thoughts, final plugs. I know, Josh, definitely you should plug your TikToks because they're very good, and then we'll close out. So yeah, Josh, you want to go first?
Yeah, the reality is Jews should be voting on the right, not because, oh, the Republican Party has all the answers, but the left has all the anti-Semitism right now. And we can go into it at a different time, but that's just point blank, simple. And yes, I do have a TikTok and I try to post a lot of things exposing these. And my TikTok, it's locks_n_schmear. Look it up, check me out. I have some great videos.
That's
Sounds delicious.
LOX locks, not LOCKS. Right?
Yeah, and schmear, SCHMEAR.
For the Goyim out there. Yeah. Nicole?
I want to say that the Republican Party has a lot to learn from the Jewish community, as well as Black and Brown and Asian communities. It's important to us to have a big tent and that everyone have a space under that tent. And you guys know that I am absolutely dedicated and working hard toward that goal. I am so very honored to be a member of this group and to call you all my friends.
We love you.
Love you back.
Bottom line is, Jews are under attack on a daily basis, not just in New York City, but throughout America. We're seeing the establishment of essentially Jew-free zones on university campuses. That totally flies in the face of American exceptionalism. You can tune in to see the Daily Kvetch on the Maryland Republican Jewish Council Facebook page just about every day, with the exception of major Jewish holidays. The Daily Kvetch has taken off already this high holiday season for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as well as for the beginning of Sukkot.
And for me, and I think this kind of wraps up everything in a neat little bow, I'd say the Republican Party is not perfect, but we're a group of people who care, and we care about your rights. We care about your ability to live safely in the United States and to be able to protect yourself. And if we've been able to inspire at least one person to consider maybe having further conversations with us, I know everybody on this call and pretty much everybody in the Republican Party I could think of is happy to sit and have a nice debate with you, have a conversation with you, and just be candid. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I know that we've been trying to do this for a while, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to sit down, have this conversation, and share it with the world with social media. And hopefully everybody watching found this interesting and got something out of it. Please reach out to us. Don't hesitate. And Direct Line will be back next week with another exciting guest. Have a great night.